Hello everybody, my name is Paul Smyers. I'm a licensed real estate agent in the state of Virginia, and today I'm going to talk about the negotiation process of finding the property and going through the bidding, because sometimes it gets complicated, and I'll give you a few examples here. One of the things that happens in a bidding situation is if you're the seller, you may have a secret idea that maybe you don't really need the asking amount because maybe you got a great job coming up and you want to move, and holding on to the property is going to delay you and so on. So you have an idea that maybe you could just let go of the property for a little bit less, but you don't want to tell the buyers that. On the other hand, if you're a buyer, you have to start thinking about, if you really love a property that you're going to bid on, you want to know, you want to win it basically, and you want to be very confident in your bidding. But there's a very difficult process because you don't know what the other side is holding in their cards and so on. So one thing that you can do, if you, let's say the price, we'll use a nice round number like $200,000 for a property. It's a pretty small, it's a low end, but anyway, let's say there's a property of $200,000. And the seller says, well, you know, his realtor says, well, let's price this at 220 and see what we get, or maybe 210, because typically a real estate sale often closes somewhere around 93-95% of the asking price, typically, but it's not, you know, always true. There's a lot of times when you get way overbid, and I've heard of stories where people are bidding like $50,000 over the asking. So in this case, you might have to use what they call an acceleration clause. And what that is when you're bidding is you put in as an addendum on your contract that you are willing to go, let's say $500 or $1,000 over anybody else's bid up to a certain amount that you can afford. So let's say the property is $200,000 and you think that's a pretty good deal. The owner's asking 220 or 215 or something, and you know that, man, this place is really fantastic. It just perfectly suits you, the right location, and you have that card in your back. You say, okay, I'm willing to pay more because I really love this place, and as soon as I get it, I'm going to do something with it that's going to increase the value. So you can put an acceleration clause in your contract saying, look, I'll go up to X dollars. And I actually had a situation like that one time where we won by $1,000. $1,000 made all the difference. I also had a situation where we were bidding really high, but the higher bid was only $3,000 higher than what we bid, and we lost it. And we could have just said, hey, let's slap on another $4,000, we would have won it. In that case, the seller was having, another bidder had an acceleration clause for $350, keep stepping it up, and so they end up getting the property. So this is the kind of situation that you can get into. And one thing that if you're going to bid confidently on a property, you want to know, this is what I really want. If I lose it, I'm not going to be very happy about it, because maybe you're not going to find anything like that for a long time. So you say, you and your partner, maybe you're buying it together, you say, look, honey, we want this property and it's just absolutely perfect for us. It's got a stream or a pond or something and whatever, and you just feel like, I'll pay $5,000 over asking, because in the long run, $5,000 isn't going to look like much to me. I won't regret it. So this is how the bidding can go sometimes. And sometimes you have multiple bidders and you don't know what they're saying. Now, the other real estate agent is not able to tell us, without legal written permission from the seller, what the other offers are. So you're kind of blind. You know, you can, okay, the other real estate agent says, we have several offers, but they're not telling us exactly how many or how much the bid is. If you're on the buyer side in that situation, you have to kind of like get, okay, where is my limit? Okay, where's my limit to how much I can afford and what I want to bid? Now, this is an interesting process. So I urge you to get together with your agent. If you're buyers and you have a buyer agent on your side, start thinking about what you're willing to pay and what your starting bid is going to be. Because typically when you make an offer, usually but not always, the seller's going to make a counter offer. And the counter offer may be much higher than you want to go. Let's say you know the price is $215 and you bid, okay, I'm bidding 209, and the seller says, no, I'm not going to take that. So you might step it up a little bit. So this is the kind of situation, and there's another thing that happens in a real estate purchase too, when you have the inspections. Now, if you make a contingency that your purchase needs to be based on the inspection, and you have an inspector lined up, and you have in the contract, I got 10 business days to do this, or 2 weeks, and you can find an inspector and come along and estimate, and he comes out and says, okay, this is what I found. You have to wait. Maybe someone else says, hey, I'm going to waive the inspection, and I've seen that happen too, where the buyer was really eager. They said, we're flat out buying this thing, we're going to waive the inspection. Now, that can get you into some difficult situations, because if you don't know what you're looking at, when you look at a property and evaluate it, it might be that you missed something. Maybe you missed the roof or foundation, and you have overbid on something that turns out you're going to have a problem. On the other hand, there are times and situations where people are very knowledgeable. There are many contractors and builders who also buy houses, and you can hire somebody to come with you when you first look at the house. Bring that inspector with you sometimes, and have him go with you, because you want to have it inspected. You don't want the seller to be saying, look, this guy wants to wait for an inspection. It's going to take 2 more weeks, and they got a cash over here, and it'll sell like that, and they waive the inspection, and we're done. Okay, that can happen. So if you feel like you're in a market where people are buying and it's going fast and there's lots of bids, it's a desirable property, you got to really start thinking about, what am I going to bid? How much can I afford? How much can I go over? And will I waive any of the inspections and so on? Now, I've looked at many houses, and because I'm in the business, I talk to a lot of inspectors and so on, and I have a general knowledge that, for example, the property that I live in right now, I had to make a decision within 2 days. They said, we looked at the property 2 days after it was on the market, and then they said, well, we're closing, we're going to accept bids by Friday, and it's Tuesday. Well, we got to get going here. So we had to get quick, and I had to make a quick evaluation of the property. And I said, well, first of all, this particular property was being sold as is. But I looked around, I said, look, I got to make a quick decision. I don't have time to hire an inspector to come around and look with me. It's being sold as is. Let me do the best of my information and my knowledge what the deal is. So I looked around the property, and this property has multiple structures. It's about 5 or 6 or 7 extra structures. There's a workshop and a pole barn and an outhouse and an office building that I'm in now, and a house and another barn, and actually there's another residence on the property, a mobile home that has a life estate. So we've got about 4 acres here, and I had to make a quick decision. So I did, and I ended up bidding. What I bid was a top dollar, because I knew this is the kind of property in my area that is high utility, open zoning, agricultural zoning. It's already been used for agriculture in the past. So I had to make a decision. Okay, what's the deal with this house? I noticed that there was a little watermarks in the basement, which is a half basement, which is added on. And I said, well, I've seen a lot worse. And, this is a dealable, we can deal with that situation. And I just said, okay, we'll just get it. And we did. And what happened was 9 or 10 months went by, and it was dry as a bone in the basement. And then we had a power outage, and lights went out, and the sump pump went out, and water began to accumulate, and we had 8 inches down there. And then we had to pump it out with another pump. And the bottom line is we ended up fixing that problem. About a year later, we found a solution I won't get into right now. But it worked, and we pumped the water out, got a new sump pump, and we never had a problem with wetness in the basement again. And that was the main problem with this particular house. Now it's solved. It has an 80-year roof on it that's still metal. It's metal, and it's still good, and it doesn't leak at all. So it's a low-maintenance house. And that's another factor that you want to consider when you buy a property. How much maintenance is going to be taken to maintain that type of property? For example, let's say someone has a beautiful landscape garden. They have all these beautiful shrubs and rhododendrons and azaleas and everything going on there. and it looks fantastic in the spring. But then you start thinking like, whoa, all these plants keep growing, and some of them are right next to the foundation, and they could crack, and the roots go down there, and you got some problems. If you're not willing to maintain an exotic garden with lots of different kinds of plants and shrubs and everything, then don't buy that property, because you're going to have to deal with it. And there are sometimes people, I ran across a property a couple of years ago where they had an extremely well-maintained, beautiful garden that somebody obviously loved all those shrubs, but then you think about buying that, well, then I'm going to have to maintain all that myself, and then I'll have to hire a gardener, you see. So you want to be careful about when you bid, but when you do find something that you really like, and you think to yourself, okay, I can deal with, let's say it's got a little bit of problem, needs a little landscaping or some little issue that you can deal with. It's hard to find a property that has absolutely perfect everything, no maintenance. You're going to have to compromise on something. So when you bid, have that feeling in your mind that I'm going to probably have to do something to this property sooner or later. Maybe I need to pave the driveway. Maybe I need to trim the shrubs. Maybe I need to wash the outside or the vinyl siding and so on. But those are all things that you can deal with. What you look for is the foundation, the roof, and the basic structure, and if it has accessory buildings and so on, that adds extra value. Now, in the place that I'm living around right now, those extra those extra buildings that we have on this property turn out to be extremely valuable, because I live in an area where there's a lot of people who have small businesses. Maybe they're a contractor or a builder, or electrician, and so on, and they need outbuildings. They can't have a lot that just has a tiny little parking space and just hardly any room on the lot. They have to have room to park their equipment, maybe a shed, maybe a storage building, maybe some kind of a workshop, which I have here. So I realized right away when I saw this property that I have all the means to make this into a money-making property in a variety of different ways. And the main thing that happens with me, I maintain my own property here. I even have a welder and so on. I do my own lawn. So I realized that this property has all the needs for me, that I can maintain it, I can fix things, I got tools, I got sheds, I got a workshop, I got storage. I even have a little office building that I'm in right now. So I made a quick decision. I'm buying it, okay? And we bid high, we bid top dollar, we won it, but it could have been a situation where we missed it by $1,000 or $2,000. So I said, okay, screw it. I'm going to bid high, start high, and go over the amount, and I'm never going to regret it. So a little bit about bidding. Think about what I've been saying here. Bidding can be a very interesting process when you get into multiple bids and different kinds of properties. So from the seller side, I mentioned that. I'll talk a little bit more about the seller side in another video, but you have, let's say you're a seller and you have a whole bunch of bids. In the case that I came across one property earlier this year where we had a pretty high bid, but the seller had an infinity, they wanted to give it to this family. They needed the sale, but they wanted to sell it to someone that they knew who had 5 kids, and they needed a big house, and I'm just alone, and I didn't need a really big house. And we just said, okay, let it go, because these people, the seller chose us a buyer who wasn't actually the top buyer, but they chose it based on another factor. And that's another thing you may want to consider, that the price is not always the deciding factor for the seller or for the buyer. So that's a little bit of information about buying and selling property, and a little bit about the negotiation. I hope this is helpful to you. It's applicable in any state. Here in Virginia, it's really beautiful. Agricultural land is in demand, and it's a beautiful place to have a homestead. So thanks again for watching. If you find some value here, please like and share and subscribe. I am going to make a commitment to make a lot more videos now, because I was busy for about a year. I haven't really made a video, and I'm going to start upgrading that. I got a new office here, and we're going to cover some different kinds of books and different kinds of other resources that can be useful in your search for your ideal homestead. So thanks again for listening. My name is Paul Smyers. I work in Virginia. I work for Lions Team Real Estate in Moneta. So thanks again.